Hello class, welcome to the fourth part of our review lecture video wherein we will discuss or run down all the topics that will be included on your periodic examination. We're done with the enzymology as well as the part 2 and part 3. Now let us proceed with the last part, the part 4. And then yung part 5 will be more of a question and answer portion wherein I will flash exercise questions and then you will answer it on your own. Parang practice guide niyo siya for the upcoming examinations. But for now, let us focus on the last part. And let us begin this discussion with the bioenergetics. Its definition includes that bioenergetics is a field in biochemistry and cell biology that concerns energy flow through your living systems. Again, it concerns energy flow through living systems. And when we say energy, ano ba yung pinaka-word that comes up to our mind? That is what we call your ATP. Okay, or your adenosine triphosphate. It is the principal molecule for storing and transferring energy in cells. It is often referred to as energy currency of the cell. Pag sinabing energy, storing, transferring, automatic, ATP kagad yung pumapasok sa isip natin. Okay? Or your adenosine triphosphate. And then if we will dissect the ATP and its chemical structure, it includes this po. Okay, on our right side, we can observe that your ATP, it is being comprised of 3 phosphate groups. Okay, kaya siya triphosphate. 1 ribose sugar, adenosine, okay, adenine, 1 adenine as its nitrogenous base, and 1 ribose sugar, kaya siya adenosine. Uy, ma'am, parang familiar yung ganyang chemical structure. Parang nadaanan na yan or naaral na natin yan. Familiar po yan. Yes, they are very similar with your nucleic acid. Okay, meron siyang phosphate group, it has a ribose sugar, and then it has its nitrogenous bases. So, para na din siyang nucleotide or your nucleic acid. Okay, ATP po yun. Next, this is what we call the law of thermodynamics. Hindi ko na siya i-discuss thoroughly kasi hindi naman po siya magiging applicable for the biochemistry and masyado siyang magiging madugo pag dinisect natin siya isa-isa. Okay, ang mahalaga, narinig nyo niya siya from me, nadaanan siya for the biochemistry. If this will be discussed much further, doon na lang po yun sa clinical chemistry ninyo. But for now, hindi pa po siya masyadong applicable kasi sobrang information overload na siya. Okay? Padaliin lang natin ang ating mga buhay, i-discuss natin kung ano lang talaga yung relevant. Okay, ang dami sinabi ni ma'am. Ayun po yung law of thermodynamics. We have the first law. That is what we call the law of conservation of energy. Hindi po ito kasama sa exam. Mga good to know lang. Second law of thermodynamics says that their entropy of any isolated system always increases. And then the third law of thermodynamics states that the entropy of a system approaches a constant value as the temperature approaches your absolute zero. So, hindi po siya kasama, pero mas maganda na alam nyo na si Gibbs free energy. Pag tinanong kayo ng clinical chemistry prof nyo, nabanggit ba to sa inyong biochem? Opo, nabanggit. Diniscuss, wag na lang kayo umimik. Okay? Next is the enthalpy and the entropy. Pag sinabing entropy, this is equivalent to the disorder. Okay? Pag sinabing entropy or is disorder in a system, yun agad yun. Pag tinanong kayo ng pre-quiz, ito na, agad-agad. Clinical chemistry, yun na yun. Okay? So ito po siya. Hindi na po natin siya i-discuss much further. Ako din, nahirapan akong aralin in a way na paano ko siya ituturo kasi medyo complicated nga po siya. So this is the summary of the thermodynamics. Daanan lang natin. Next, ito po yung pinakabisado ni Ma'am Trina, pero hindi naman kailangan kabisaduhin. Ma'am, ang gulo mo naman. Yes, medyo magulo po si Ma'am. Hindi na po siya kailangan kabisaduhin yung pagkakasunod-sunod ng pathway. Hindi katulad ng pentose pathway kasi mas madali yon. Meron lang tayong 0, 1, 2, 3 reactions and then meron ka ng product. Dito kasi sobrang haba ng dadaanan. Pero ang mahalaga sa Krebs cycle, alam nyo kung saan siya nag-umpisa, kung saan siya nagte-take place, or where does it happen, particularly in the cell. And then kung ano-ano yung mga products niya kasi i-mention naman natin siya sa susunod na slide. Okay? The Krebs cycle, also known as your TCA cycle, it is a biochemical pathway. It is used to generate energy through the oxidation of your acetyl-CoA. And then the function of your Krebs cycle is for the synthesis of your NADH and mainly for the production of your amino acids. Okay, si pentose pathway, kung matatandaan, it is necessary for the production of nucleotides. Ito naman si Krebs cycle, it is necessary for the production of your amino acids. Your Krebs cycle takes place in the mitochondria of our eukaryotic cells. Meanwhile, for the prokaryotic cells, wala po silang mitochondria, so it happens in the cytoplasm, particularly in the cytosol. Okay, mahalaga na alam nyo kung saan nag-uumpisa si Krebs cycle. So sa glucose, ano po yung 6C? It has 6 carbons. Okay, meron tayong mga enzymes that helps these particular substance to be degraded, such as yung mga iba't ibang enzymes natin. Pero dito, yan yung mga malate dehydrogenase, fumarase, ganyan. Dito si glucose, susunod niya si pyruvate. Paikot po siya. Okay, ang mahalaga alam po natin yung mga results ng ating Krebs cycle. We have 3 NADH. Dito po siya 1, 2, and 3. We have 1 FADH2, 1 GTP, and 2 carbon dioxide. Okay, yun po sila. Other than that, wala naman tayong kailangan pang pakabisaduhin, which is sila citrate, ilang carbon ba, hindi. Ang mahalaga lang, alam nyo to. Okay, yun lang po, basically for the Krebs cycle. Let us now proceed with the next topic, which is about the lipid chemistry, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, this is about the lipid chemistry. As we're going through this review, I believe you were able to read thoroughly the discussion or your book in regards to the lipid chemistry. So nabanggit na kasi natin yun before. Ito, aaralin nyo lang siya and then additional topics lang siya kasi sobrang broad na mga topics natin for the examination. Okay? I am just helping you para mapadali yung review ninyo and then additional topics lang po ito. Kasi these topics or this information may or may not be included on your examination. So for the lipid chemistry, the components of the cell membrane are phospholipids, sphingolipids, and then free cholesterol. Okay, si lipids po iyon, yung mga fats natin, fatty acids. Lipid chemistry po, doon po sila nag-e-evolve. Next, your vitamin D can be derived from cholesterol. Yes, your vitamin D can be derived from your cholesterol and then it is stored in the skin. 7-dehydrocholesterol, we need sunlight for it to be activated. So, correct lang natin yung common knowledge natin simula pagkabata na tumatapat po tayo sa sunlight every morning para magkaroon ng vitamin D. No, that's not true. Ang totoo po doon is that we have innate vitamin D in our skin. We just needed the sunlight para ma-activate siya. Sunlight na healthy sunlight sa umaga, yung mga around 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. Pero yung katanghalian, ay Diyos ko, hindi po yun healthy. Hindi na ma-activate yun doon. Ang makukuha mo na ay skin cancer. Okay? Next, pag sinabing si lipid chemistry, papasok dyan yung mga tinatawag nating bile salts. Okay? Bile salts are products of your cholesterol metabolism. Yes, galing po sila sa mga cholesterol. They are being metabolized. They are coming from the cholesterol. Your bile salts are amphipathic. Amphipathic meaning meron siyang polar and non-polar regions. Bakit po yun? Kasi these bile salts, it increases the surface of area of fats for digestion, absorption, and emulsification. So itong mga bile salts na to, it helps in the digestion of the fats. Also, it helps to absorb the fat-soluble vitamins. And what are these fat-soluble vitamins? Vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and K. Ang palatandaan natin, vitamin ADEC. Okay, so gamitan lang natin ito. ADEC. Parang addict lang. Addict. Mga fat-soluble vitamins po yan. And then your bile salts, they act as emulsifiers. Parang humahalo sila doon sa mga fatty food na kinain mo or na tinake mo like samgyupsal. Hahalo sila doon sa mga fatty food na yon once na nandun na sila sa inyong intestine para ma-absorb ng inyong mga cells. Kasi kung wala itong mga bile salts na to, hindi sila ma-absorb. Sobra kasing laki ng mga molecules na to. So, ang trabaho ni bile salts is to emulsify these fats. Liver is responsible for the bile production. If you have a problem in your liver, you will have a problem in bile production and you will have a problem in digestion and the absorption of the fats. Hindi po maganda pag hindi na-absorb yung fats. Okay? So kung bakit, ito po i-discuss natin sa mga susunod nating readings. The main mechanism of action of steroid hormones at the level of the DNA molecule is that the DNA contains your genes, so they play a role in gene expression. The effect of thromboxane is thrombus formation, platelet aggregation, in contrast to prostacyclin prevents platelet aggregation. So prostaglandin is the major substance for inflammation. So yung sinabi natin mga fat-soluble vitamins, ito sila. Si vitamin A for the vision, D for calcium metabolism, E as an antioxidant, and K for the blood coagulation. Again, vitamin A for the vision, vitamin D for calcium metabolism, and E as an antioxidant, and K as blood coagulation. Okay, pakitandaan. And then these are the 3 types of ketones. Ano ba yung mga ketones? Mga byproduct na ng mga fats natin, di ba po? And then we have your acetone for diabetic patients. Okay, yung mga diabetic patients, kung matatandaan, meron silang fruity acetone breath. That is because of the production of the acetone. Next is the acetoacetic acid and beta-hydroxybutyric acid. You produce ketones whenever you oxidize fats. And ketoacidosis will result if you use fat as energy. Okay, I believe na-discuss na tong ketoacidosis na to. Okay, next reading is bile that is produced in the liver and stored in the gallbladder is released into the intestines for the fat emulsification. Gallbladder is used for the concentration and storage of bile. Complication of cholecystectomy, okay, yung pagtanggal ng inyong mga gallbladder is diluted bile. If you eat fatty food after undergoing cholecystectomy, you may experience diarrhea and steatorrhea due to not enough bile concentration. So steatorrhea, yun yung masyadong madaming amount of fats na napunta na doon sa inyong stool kasi nga wala ka ng bile salts to act upon this fatty food para ma-reabsorb siya or ma-absorb ng ating mga cells. So, ang tendency, dire-diretso na yung mga fats, pupunta na siya sa mga stool, hindi na siya ma-absorb by the cell. So, nagkakaroon ng fatty stool. That is what we call your steatorrhea. Kasi nga, wala ka ng gallbladder. Okay, nagkaroon ka ng cholecystectomy. Bile salts are used to emulsify fats, paulit-ulit tayo, forming mixed micelles. Micelles, or I don't know how you pronounce it correctly. Once you have mixed the micelle or micelle, this will be acted upon by the lipase enzyme coming from the pancreas. Okay, pancreatic lipase. Pag po tinanong saan po ang origin ng inyong mga enzyme na lipase, doon po siya nanggagaling sa pancreas. The digested products will assemble as micelle and will be absorbed in the intestinal mucosa. Emulsification is dispersing large fat globules into smaller globules. Smaller fat globules will have a greater surface and more enzymes can interact with emulsified fats. So dapat po wala po tayong masyadong fats na o-observe sa ating mga stools. Okay, dapat hindi magkaroon ng steatorrhea kasi nga dapat sa intestine pa lang nare-reabsorb na siya through your bile acids or your bile salts. Okay? Okay, going back to your lipids or the fatty acid derivatives, we have your saturated fatty acid and then your unsaturated fatty acid. Next, this is another type of your lipid. This is what we call your triacylglycerol or your TAG. Okay, it is the main storage of the energy for lipids. An ester of glycerol with 3 fatty acid. It contains 3 fatty acid. Pakitandaan, excess intake of carbohydrates will be converted to fatty acids and will be esterified with glycerol or your sugar alcohol. Okay, so ang dami po nating mga information na sinasabi dito, but basically, ang ating triglycerides or triacylglycerol. Okay, all 3 OH groups of glycerol are esterified. It contains neutral fats. They are also called neutral fats because the carboxyl groups of the fatty acids are bound in ester linkages and can no longer function as acids. Therefore, it will not be ionized and will not become an ion. The fatty acid and moiety in lipid esters is known as acyl group. What else? Ano po ba yung mga important details natin dito? Ito, soaps are used to remove the dirt. Soap molecules have the non-polar alkyl chain interacting with non-polar hydrophobic tail reacting with one another with hydrophilic head. Okay, so ang mga soap po natin, they can emulsify the fat, yung mga fat content, yung mga lipid content. Yes, yun po yung kanilang trabaho. What else? Next is what we call the phospholipids. Okay? So ano po bang mga important details natin in regards to the phospholipids? And for the phospholipid, ang important ng ulit, again, important details or information that needs to be discussed for the phospholipid is that when one alcohol of glycerol is esterified by a phosphoric acid rather than by a carboxylic acid, phosphatidic acid is produced. Also, ano pa ba? Ang mahalaga lang sa phospholipid is its function for the cell, integral part of the cell or the cell membrane, okay, which will be flashed later on. But ito, mga additional information lang to. Hindi ko alam kung ba siya sinama. Okay? Next, ito mahalaga to si lipoproteins. Lipoproteins are transport proteins. Again, they are transport proteins. The major non-polar lipid in our body are cholesterol ester and triglyceride. Again, here the major non-polar lipids in our body are cholesterol ester and the triglyceride because they are non-polar and they are insoluble in the blood. So they need lipoproteins for them to be transported from one organ to another organ. Okay, kasi kung matatandaan, parang combination siya ng lipid and the protein. Kaya nga siya tinawag na lipoproteins. Okay? Kailangan natin yung part ni lipid, ni protein part, lipid and protein. Kailangan natin yung isang part ni protein para ito ay matransport to other organs. Lipid must not bind to proteins to make them water soluble. Lipid must bind to proteins to make them water soluble for transport in the blood. Okay, like what I've mentioned. For free fatty acid, it is the transport protein that is what we call the albumin. Again, ang gulo ng sinabi ni ma'am. So, lipoproteins, it is the combination or the binding of your lipids and then the proteins. The lipids needs the proteins to make them water soluble and for them to be able to be transported in the blood. For free fatty acids, its transport protein is what we call the albumin. Okay, and then meron tayong two laboratory techniques used to separate the lipoproteins from one another. Meron tayong tinatawag na ultracentrifugation and what we call the electrophoresis. So itong mga chylomicrons, triglyceride, VLDL, HDL, LDL, discuss natin siya isa-isa sa susunod na slide. Okay, so the lipoprotein lipase hydrolyzes the triglyceride bound in lipoproteins such as your chylomicrons, your VLDL, yielding monoglyceride and free fatty acid. Tapos meron po tayong tinatawag na chylomicrons. So all these lipoproteins will differ based on their content. If it has more triglyceride or either it is chylomicron or VLDL, it contains more cholesterol ester and it is more of HDL and LDL. Pag sinabing chylomicrons, it contains triglyceride, less protein. Since it has more fats, in the ultracentrifugation, it flows. Okay? It is produced in the intestines and it is responsible for the exogenous transports of your triglyceride. Pakitandaan po, ang pinakamagandang pakitandaan kay chylomicron is it is the lightest but the biggest lipoprotein. Again, lightest but biggest lipoprotein. Tandaan po ito as it is included in the board exam and as well as in the clinical chemistry. Lightest but biggest lipoprotein. Next, after a fatty meal, the blood appears milky. Kung makikita niyo yung mga blood ninyo after centrifugation, pagkakakain lang, milky siya. So dapat pag naka-fasting yung patient, tapos meron siyang test na, anong tawag dito? FBS. Okay, meron po siyang test na ganun, fasting blood sugar. Meron siyang lipid test, lipid blood chem. Dapat hindi milky yung kanyang sample. Ibig sabihin, pag naging kulay white yan, yung serum niya, milky, ibig sabihin kakakain lang ng patient, nagsinungaling siya sa inyo. If it appeared to be milky. Kasi nga, yung inyong serum, it will appear only milky if it contains a high concentration of chylomicrons. Ibig sabihin, kakatapos lang kumain. Heparin, it is an anticoagulant. It also helps to clear the chylomicrons from the blood, perhaps by stimulating the lipoprotein lipase. Hindi naman po natin pwede gamitin si heparin, yung anticoagulant natin, for the chemistry test. Okay? So mas maganda pa din na instruct lang natin si patient to do fasting for the lipid profile test and for the fasting blood sugar para hindi po siya interrupt doon sa ating analyte. Next, chylomicrons, done na ha, pakitandaan po, VLDL, it contains a lot of triglyceride. It is smaller than chylomicron. It is produced in the liver and is responsible for the endogenous transport. Next, it is also called your pre-beta lipoprotein because of its electrophoretic mobility, VLDL. Okay, ito mga ito makikita nyo sa lipid profile test. Next, your LDL, your low density lipoprotein. It contains more cholesterol. It is responsible for the transport of cholesterol from the liver to the different tissues. If you have a lot of LDL, makinig po maigi, that says in the blood for a long time, and it will be oxidized then if it will be deposited to tunica intima or the arteries, causing atherosclerosis or bad cholesterol. Okay, si LDL siya po si bad cholesterol. And then ito yung mga nag-accumulate papunta doon sa ating mga arteries, and then it causes yung ating atherosclerosis. Okay, that can cause stroke. Okay, it is a risk factor of the stroke. Next, the migration of LDL is similar with beta globulin, so that's the reason why LDL is called your beta lipoprotein. Again, chylomicrons, lightest but the biggest lipoprotein, VLDL. It is smaller than chylomicron, and then it is responsible for the endogenous transport. Meanwhile, LDL, pag LDL, bad cholesterol. Pakitandaan na po yun. And then, pag nag-deposit siya into our arteries, that can cause atherosclerosis because the LDL is what we call the bad cholesterol. And then the migration of LDL is similar with beta globulin. So that's the reason why LDL is called beta lipoprotein. Next, yung HDL, pakitandaan, it contains more of cholesterol. It has the highest content of protein. Since it has the highest content of protein, it is the heaviest lipoprotein, but it is the smallest. Sila yung kabaligtaran ni chylomicrons. Si chylomicrons, lightest but the biggest. Ito, heaviest but the smallest. It acts as a scavenger, removing excess cholesterol, the tissues back to the liver, then it is converted to your bile acid. Yun naman yung tinatawag natin good cholesterol, si HDL. Okay, bad cholesterol, good cholesterol. Kabaligtaran ni chylomicrons HDL. Yung nagkakos na milky appearance po sa ating after a fatty meal, yun yung tinatawag nating chylomicrons. So next, the biological membrane or the cell membrane is being composed of a bilipid layer. Ulit-ulit, it contains a hydrophobic non-polar tail and hydrophilic polar head. It is responsible for the semi-permeability of the cell membrane, but not all substances can pass because of the lipid bilayer. So tingnan ulit natin ang ating cell. Okay, kung may nagtatangkang pumasok na water, ang ating cell, it is being composed of lipid bilayer. Kung hydrophilic head, may polar head sa labas. Magkabaligtaran sa loob, meron po tayong hydrophobic non-polar tail. Doon naman sa loob ng cell, meron pa ring hydrophilic polar head. So ang nagkukos po ng semi-permeability is this what we call the lipid bilayer. Kasi nga, meron kang hydrophilic head. Okay, but the simple diffusion, maaaring pumasok yung mga tinatawag nating molecules such as yung oxygen and carbon dioxide. May mga facilitated diffusion naman tayo na kung saan kailangan ng mga transporters para yung mga certain biomolecules makapass through sa ating mga cells. Okay po. The polar head includes the glycerol, phosphate, and the alcohol. The two fatty acids are the non-polar lipid. Two fatty acids po yan mga yan. So, integral part of the cell pa rin ng ating mga lipids. Hindi lang siya mayroong bad notion pag sinabing lipids or fats, bad po sa ating katawan, bad cholesterol, and hindi lang po. Marami po silang major functions, and one of its major function is it is included in the biological membrane kung saan yung mga diffusion and the osmosis happens in the cell. Okay, without these lipid bilayers, hindi magiging maganda yung exchange ng ating mga molecules within our cells and our body. Okay, when we say hydrophobic, water-loving, hydrophilic, water-loving polar head group, and hydrophobic is the water-hating non-polar tails. So ito, additional information lang with regards to the proteins. Hindi lang po yung mga nabanggit sa post-lab discussion, yung mga denaturing agents natin. These are some of the denaturing agents na pwede din mag-contribute to the breakage or the linkage of your polypeptide chains. This includes the strong acids or pH, okay, because it affects in the pH, changes in the pH, organic solvents, yung mga detergents natin, the reducing agents, your salt concentration, the heavy metal ions, nabanggit na to, the temperature changes, and the mechanical stress. Okay, so these are some of the agents that can contribute to the denaturing activity that can happen to your proteins or your amino acid. So that basically concludes our review for your biochemistry. Sorry kung medyo na late ang aking mga postings. Please mag-aral po ng maigi. Wala po talagang shortcut. Aralin ng libro, aralin ng mga lecture video, marami man po. It will be worth it someday. Okay, thank you and God bless.